I just want to welcome everyone to the panel today. I thank you so much for joining us virtually. Wish we could see everyone in person, but unfortunately, we're here virtually. So today we're going to talk about an overview of the seed funding that's available from the National Institute on Aging and the National Institute of Neurological Disorders and Stroke, as well as kind of provide a brief overview of some of the different programs that NIH has available more broadly.
Information on screen with Stephanie. NIH, National Institutes of Health, Turning Discovery into Health. SBIRSTTR, America's Seed Fund. February 23, 2021, 11 hours 2 minutes and 3 seconds.
My name is Stephanie Fertig. I'm the HHS Small Business Program Lead at the National Institutes of Health. And today I'm joined by Todd Haim from the National Institute on Aging and Natalie Rezinski from the National Institute of Neurological Disorders and Stroke. And so we're going to take some time today to kind of, again, briefly present some of the funding opportunities and different opportunities that we have, as well as answer some of the questions that you might have about those different opportunities. I'd encourage you to put your questions in the Q&A feature that's located in Zoom. I'm sure at this point, all of us have been on a couple of Zoom meetings, maybe one or two. And so there's a great Q&A chat bubble that's below in your Zoom platform. So please put your questions in the Q&A, and we'll be addressing those questions at the end of our talks. So with that, I want to make sure there's plenty of time for the Q&A and for our comments. So I'm going to put myself on mute and ask Carly to please pull up the slide.
Text, NIH, Seed. Small Business Programs. Stephanie Fertig, M.B.A. HHS, Seed, Small Business Education and Entrepreneurial Development. Office of the Director, Office of Extramural Research, National Institutes of Health.
Okay, wonderful. I see the slides, so no technical glitches yet. Always a great beginning to a virtual conference. So again, my name is Stephanie Fertig, and today I'm going to kind of provide a brief overview of the small business programs and then turn it over to both Todd and Natalie. So here at the National Institutes of Health, we really utilize the small business programs to help take those great innovations and put them into the hands of the clinicians, patients, researchers, and caregivers that need them.
Text, to seek fundamental knowledge about the nature and behavior of living systems and the application of that knowledge to enhance health, lengthen life, and reduce illness and disability. The Small Business Program helps NIH accelerate discoveries from bench to bedside.
So we really see the mission of the Small Business Program as turning discovery into health. Some of this may be review for many of you, but I think it's still important since we do have some individuals who may be a little less familiar with the program.
Text, Small Business Innovation Research Program, 3.2%, $1 billion, set-aside program for small business concerns to engage in federal R&D, with potential for commercialization. Small Business Technology Transfer Program, 0.45%, $146 million, set-aside program to facilitate cooperative R&D between small business concerns and U.S. research institutions, with potential for commercialization.
There are actually two programs, the Small Business Innovation Research and Small Business Technology Transfer programs. Overall, that's about $1.2 billion dedicated funding for small businesses to do research and development. That's a significant amount of money. Now, one of the myths, and this is one of the things I'm going to do today, is what I affectionately call a little myth busting. One of the myths or one of the misconceptions people have is what are the differences between the SBIR and STTR programs? The big difference between the two is that the SBIR allows partnering, but the STTR requires partnering with a nonprofit research institution. That's the big difference. All the policy differences between the two really fall out from that main difference between the SBIR and STTR programs. So it isn't one of scope, actually. The scope of the two programs are often similar. They're reviewed in the same review panels. So they are very similar programs, but there is that difference. Next slide. So often when we're talking about the SBIR and STTR programs or the small business programs, We do tend to just default to SBIR. I try not to, but do bear in mind when you're talking to many of us, that's something, I guess, a bad habit that we may have. Now, this is the largest source of early stage capital for life sciences in the United States. I say this is kind of free money and that it's not a loan and it's non-dilutive. We don't take a piece of the company when we support through the SBIR and STTR programs. There are specific data and intellectual property protections in place. And many of our awardees really do leverage this funding to bring their technology to an inflection point or to the market. Now, that inflection point is often further investment by a third-party investor or company partners.
Diagram shows steps, with arrows in between each, from basic research discovery to proof of concept to research and development to scale up and manufacturing to sales and distribution. Research grants sits above SBIRSTTR box, then an arrow indicating company formed, then boxes for friends, family, and founders, then angel investors, then venture capital, then strategic partners.
So really, we know that oftentimes the small business program may not in every case take something to market, but it's that inflection point that can be very important. It's de-risking that technology, de-risking that product with the SBIR STTR funds.
A diagram shows Phase 1, discovery and feasibility, and Phase 2, development and full R&D. An arrow shows Phase 1 to Phase 2 fast track, and then another arrow shows direct to Phase 2, SBIR only. Phase 2 leads to competing renewal award, Phase 2B and then to commercial market. Phase 2 also leads to commercialization readiness pilot, CRP, and then to commercial market. Only some NIH institutes, centers participate. A separate box contains a figure for each phase. Phase 1, $259,613, 1 to 2 years. Phase 2, $1,730,751, 1 to 3 years. Asterisk beside each figure leads to the following text. NIH has a waiver from the Small Business Administration to exceed these budgets for most topics.
So I could spend a lot of time on this slide, but I'm really going to focus on a couple of really important points. There's a number of ways that companies can come in to the program and utilize the program. And different institutes and centers do use the small business program in different ways to meet their mission and meet the needs of their scientific community and of their patient community. So one of the misconceptions that are out there is, what is the definition of a feasibility study? So when you see a Phase 1 SBIR or when you're going for a Phase 1 SBIR, what does that really mean? Well, that's a feasibility study, but one person's feasibility study is another person's further research and development. Here at NIH, we don't really clearly define feasibility study. It's a flexible definition. So while a Phase 1 SBIR may be a feasibility study and the Phase 2 SBIR is full research and development, we don't clearly define those. I will tell you that Phase 1 and Phase 2 in the SBIR and STTR programs doesn't have anything to do with clinical trials phases. That's an unfortunate similarity in the nomenclature. So just because something is a Phase 1 doesn't mean, doesn't really tell you a lot about exactly where it sits within the product development pipeline. We also have something called a fast track that allows companies to come in with Phase 1 and Phase 2 at the same time. So in one application to reduce some of the time delay between the Phase 1 and Phase 2 and the review, keep them from having to submit an additional application for the Phase 2. We also have something called the direct to Phase 2. Now this is just for the SBIR program only, for those companies that may have already done the feasibility work, already done all of that work, and they can jump directly to a Phase 2. Now, regardless of how a company gets to the Phase 2, either through the more standard phase processes or through a fast track or direct to Phase 2, many institutes and centers, including NIA and NINDS, has something called a competing renewal or a Phase 2B. There's a real recognition that even when you get to the end of a Phase 2, you may not be ready for the commercial market or even that inflection point. You may need additional time and funds. And that's where the phase 2B comes in. It gives you that additional research and development that might be necessary. We also have something called the Commercialization Readiness Pilot, or CRP. And again, that provides additional business and technical assistance to help bridge some of the gaps that might be between the phase 2 and that commercial market or inflection point. Now, both NIA and NINDS participate in these programs, but they do use them a little bit differently. And so that's one of the reasons why it's really important to reach out and talk with program staff, talk with your program officials, talk with us before applying, before submitting. If you have any questions, we are here really to answer those questions, and we are here to help you navigate the process. Particularly if you're new, and I understand there might be a couple companies who are fairly new to the SBIR and STTR program, even just navigating that phase 1 versus fast track versus direct to phase 2, again, program staff can help kind of talk through and help you determine what might be the best way for you to enter the program. One of the other big myths that we have that I often hear is around budget. So you'll see the SBA, the Small Business Administration budgetary guidelines here in the corner. But we do have a waiver at NIH that allows us to award make some awards above these guidelines. And so it's important, again, to reach out to Natalie or Todd or other program staff to talk about your budget, because there may be some flexibility there, particularly if you're doing human subjects, large animal work, or animal studies that may require additional time or money. Reach out and talk with us. There's probably some flexibility that you might not be aware of, and we can help talk through that as well.
The website homepage, featuring a coronavirus 2019 alert at the top. Text information on slide. https://sbir.nih.gov. Majority of the funding goes to investigator-initiated applications. Standard receipt dates: September 5, January 5, April 5. NIH Applicant Assistance Program, sbir.cancer.gov/programs-education/AAP.
There's a wealth of information on our website, including new funding opportunities, information about exactly how to apply, the Applicant Assistance Program. Again, I know a couple of companies here may not have received an SBIR-STTR award yet, so please, you can also look at the Applicant Assistance Program. But at the end of the day, the majority of our applications still do come in through those general omnibus solicitations. And we're really interested in those exciting new innovations. We're interested in, again, helping translate some of those innovations and getting them into the hands of the people that need them.
Text: SEED supports the NIH innovator community, funding and resources, to validate and advance discoveries to products that improve patient care and health, and develop relationships with strategic partners and build opportunities for NIH innovators to further their product development efforts. A Venn diagram shows the overlap of 3 categories: small business innovation, academic innovation, and innovator support. Photos of staff are included along with email addresses: Stephanie Fertig, stephanie.fertig@nih.gov. Chris Sasiela, chris.sasiela@nih.gov. Ashim Subedi, ashim.subedee@nih.gov. Matt McMahon with no email listed. SBIR@od.nih.gov.
I also want to talk a little bit about the new office that we have here in the Office of the Director. The SEED office, the Small Business Education and Entrepreneurial Development. Now, SEED is a word, but it also has this, so it's an acronym and a word, and it really helps show that we are part of America's SEED Fund, which is what the SBIR and STTR is. We are seeding those innovations, seeding those businesses. So there is a recognition that there is this innovator community at NIH, and we really need to help provide not just funding through the SBIR program, but support, additional support beyond that funding to make that transition into the marketplace possible. And we need to develop those relationships with strategic partners, investors, academics, and companies to make that happen. There are 3 parts of the SEED. One is, again, the small business programs, which I manage and run, but there's also academic innovation and innovator support. I'm going to spend a little bit of time talking about some of the innovator support programs and resources that are available to our awardees to, again, help them bridge that gap.
A diagram shows technical and business assistance, TABA. A box labeled TABA needs assessment points to two other boxes. The first reading TABA funding requested in grant application and the second reading TABA consulting services coming soon, Phase 2, 2B. Below, 3 columns. Column 1, Education, with I-Core at NIH, Phase 1 and Concept to Clinic, Commercializing Innovation C3I Program. Column 2, Funding and Support, with CRP Funding, Phase 2, 2B, and Regulatory and Business Development Consultants. Column 3, Partnering and Investment Opportunities, with Company Showcase and the logos for several companies. The companies are Bio International Convention, Resi, Redefining Early Stage Investments, Life Sciences Summit, MedTech Conference, and Angel Capital Association. Website, sbir.nih.gov/support for awardees.
For our awardees, again, we recognize that a lot of the small businesses that we work with are fairly new. This may be their first company. This may be the innovator's first company, or they may have only had some limited experience on the business side of things. And there's a recognition that that means that individuals may need a little bit of additional support to make sure that their innovations can go all the way to the marketplace. As part of the small business programs, we have something called TABA, that's Technical and Business Assistance. Centrally, we have a new TABA needs assessment program that anyone who's received a Phase 1 can come in and apply for, provided you have not used our centralized services in the past. And if you have any questions about eligibility, you can always reach out to us at sbir@od.nih.gov, and we'd be happy to answer any questions you have about the TABA Needs Assessment Program. What's great about the program, and I'm going to be talking, I can talk a little bit more about it, but it's really helps companies assess what their commercial needs are and help them determine what that next best step may be for their business. What are their gaps? What do they need to do next? Companies can also ask for TABA funding, so technical and business assistance funding in their grant application. So often, if you're coming in for our TABA Needs Assessment Program in the Phase 1, that can help you determine how best to utilize them and any requests that you make and help guide your Phase 2 application. Outside and separate from TABA, we have other services as well. Education services, such as I-Core or C3I. Those programs really can help, again, with education and entrepreneurial education for those investors where this may be their first business and they really want to better understand how to think about the market and how to think about their company moving forward. In the funding and support, we have the CRP, which I mentioned, but we also have regulatory and business development consultants, and we support companies to go to company showcases throughout the year and really take advantage of partnering and investing opportunities, again, to make those connections with investors and partners.
9 headshots are shown with the heading, Finance, Strategy, Intellectual Property, Regulatory Experts.
So again, we have these innovator support team that provides that regulatory and business consultant and expertise. They have all sorts of, there's a lot of expertise here on this slide. It's pretty amazing. Investors in residence, entrepreneurs in residence, intellectual property, regulatory, and reimbursement. These are available for individuals who have awards, again, through our small business programs. And I encourage you, if you have questions or if you need expertise and support, to reach out to your program officers. That's always the best place to start if you have an award. And we can see what is the best resource for you to take advantage of for your specific needs. So that leads me to the most important piece of advice. This is true if you're trying to apply. This is true during the life of your award. This is true kind of across the board, is to talk with us.
A screenshot of the website is shown with an arrow towards the link to Engage and Connect. Text, Talk to an HHS program officer at least a month before the application deadline. List of HHS SBIR program managers, sbir.nig.gov/engage/IC-contacts. Research portfolio online reporting tools, acronym report, report.nih.gov/. Not sure who to contact? public.era.nih.gov/common/public/service/dssh/initc.era or email sbir@od.nih.gov.
Prior to submitting anything, whether it's that first grant, whether it's that phase 2, whether it's that phase 2B or CRP or whatever you're planning to submit, always talk to a program officer. Very important. It's important to reach out ahead of time. So I remember my time as a program officer, my calendar got extremely busy as we got closer to the application deadline. So very important to reach out early, but also as you're going through your award as well, I encourage you to reach out and talk with your program officer. If you have questions, if you'd have a question about either a resource that I mentioned today, or you are coming and may have an issue or may want to know what resources are available, oftentimes the program officers are the best person that can help connect you with not only what might be available from an NIH perspective, but also what might be available from their specific institute. Because again, each institute and center may offer additional resources on top of the more general ones I talked about today. And that's why I think Natalie and Todd will go into some of the details for their respective institutes. So I think, yes, this is the Get Connected slide. So obviously, if you have any questions about anything I've talked about today, again, there is that SBIR@od.nih.gov.
Get Connected slide includes links. Subscribe to the listserv, NIH Guide for Grants and Contracts, Twitter @NIH Seed, email, homepage, and read our NIH SBIRSTTR success stories.
We'd love to hear from you. You can also go to the website. We have a Twitter account. We also have a listserv where we do push out information about different opportunities and resources that are available. So I do encourage you to reach out and talk with us. So with that, I think we can go to the next slide and I will turn it over to Todd. So take it away, Todd.
Slide heading, NIA Small Business Seed Fund, Accelerating Alzheimer's and Aging Research.
Thank you very much, Stephanie, and thank you to everyone for joining. We're excited to launch the Links event, and we look forward to engaging with each of you as we go through the next 2 days. Just a reminder, many of you should be viewing this from the Jujama account. We have lots of great companies there and lots of great investors, so do go in and request meetings, and that's what it's all about. And the partnering will be open for a couple of weeks, and of course, you could always take meetings offline.
A pie chart shows the budget allocation for fiscal year 21, with the largest portions allocated to NCI, NIAID, NIA, NHLBI, NIGMS, NINDS, NIDDK, and NIMH.
So for today's talk, I want to focus on the seed fund at the NIA, and mainly through the SBIR and STTR programs. So the NIA fits into the overall NIH picture that Stephanie just talked about. At the NIA for FY21, we expect the budget to be about $132 million. And this represents significant growth from where we were 6 years ago at NIA at only $34 million. And we're fortunate to be able to have congressional funding around Alzheimer's disease and other areas to be able to really push innovation in these fields, and we hope to do so with some great innovations. Next slide. So I specifically lead the NIA Office of Small Business Research as well as NIA's training programs, and our office has several core activities. We centrally coordinate the seed funding programs across the NIA. We provide guidance to potential applicants, and we encourage applicants to come talk to us before they apply so we can demystify that application process. We conduct outreach virtually now, but also physically once we're able to safely. Funding, we seed specific topic areas, make sure that if we see any gaps for innovation, we can help fill them. Overall, our real goal is to help companies reach key value inflection points, knowing that we'll often fund things at an earlier stage than private investors would. But our hope is to be able to help support the collection of data that will allow a company, when that data is successful and positive, to reach key value inflection points. And then when they do reach those key value inflection points, we realize that those companies are going to need external funding. And we try to help in that networking front, and this conference could not be a better example. We also really work with existing stakeholders. For example, we work with ADDF, who's participating in this meeting, where they may be able to provide bridge funding to some of our phase ones in their interest space to help get them to a phase 2. And we worked with the Longevity Innovation Summits to connect some of our companies and things like that. And then one thing we really focused on recently, we call this the Year of Entrepreneurship at NIA, is we have several entrepreneurial development programs that will be rolled out throughout the year, including a couple that I'll talk about today.
4 divisions. Division of Aging Biology provides a basis in basic biology for preventive and interventional strategies to increase resilience and extend healthy aging. Division of Behavioral and Social Research supports research and research training on the processes of aging at both the individual and societal levels. Division of Geriatrics and Clinical Gerontology supports research on health, disease in older people and research on aging over the human lifespan, including its relationships to health outcomes. Division of Neuroscience supports research to further the understanding of neural and behavioral processes associated with the aging brain. Research on dementias of old age, in particular Alzheimer's disease, is one of the highest priorities.
So the NIA has 4 scientific research divisions. And if you're interested in learning about some of the great scientific initiatives that are going on at the NIA, I really encourage you to attend the talk tomorrow morning, where we'll talk about some of the both NIA and NINDS major scientific initiatives where some really exciting results have come out, such as M.B.A. or Geroscience initiatives, or BRAIN, or Blueprint, as well as our Intramural program. So that talk should be really exciting, that panel, and I encourage you to participate. But the NIA's 4 scientific divisions are the Division of Aging Biology, the Division of Behavioral and Social Research, Division of Geriatrics and Gerontology, and the Division of Neuroscience. And we coordinate the seed funding across all these divisions. So we're interested in a wide range of innovations at the NIA, obviously anything that can help the health of older adults. And that includes Alzheimer's disease and related dementias, aging in place, community aging, age-related diseases and conditions, research tools, and you see additional areas of interest to highlight some specific things.
Beside the pie chart, text reads, "We strategically fund innovations for Alzheimer's disease, AD, AD-related dementias, ADRD, and age-related change in brain function, aging in place, age-related diseases and conditions, and research tools." Additional areas of interest include companion diagnostics and other forms of personalized medicine, bioinformatics, public health informatics, or data science technologies and methods, e.g. machine learning, artificial intelligence, to better understand and predict health outcomes, novel cell and gene therapies, as well as other novel therapeutic approaches to AD, ADRD, biomarkers and diagnostic tools for the early detection of disease, prevention and therapeutics that directly target mechanisms related to aging biology, assistive technology, devices, and mobile applications for older adults and caregivers, tools technologies, and analytic methods to address health disparities among older adults.
On the right side of the slide is a snapshot of our portfolio at any point in time. And it shows that about 1/3 of our portfolio tends to be therapeutics, whether that's primarily for Alzheimer's disease, but also addressing other aging-related conditions. And then you'll see that we have a lot in the sensoring monitoring technologies, digital mobile health, supportive devices. That makes up a major part of our portfolio. And then imaging devices, in vitro diagnostics, and research tools.
Slide title, Alzheimer's disease and related dementias. Text, did you know? More than 5 million Americans are living with Alzheimer's, the only leading cause of death that cannot be prevented, cured, or even slowed. The nation's leading researchers have said continued significant investments are needed to meet the first goal of the national plan to address Alzheimer's, to effectively treat and prevent the disease by 2025. NIA funding for small business opportunities has increased 300% over the past 4 years.
So I don't think I have to tell this community about the challenges that we face related to Alzheimer's disease. We're fortunate that we have funding available to help dilute some of the risks that exist in this space, and we look forward to seeing some more great early stage opportunities that we can help support.
NIA funding opportunities. SBIR Omnibus FOAs, PA 2260, clinical trial not allowed. PA 2262, clinical trial required. Budget limits, Phase 1 $300,000, Phase 2 $2 million. STTR Omnibus FOAs, PA 2265, clinical trial not allowed. PA 2261, clinical trial required. Budget limits, Phase 1, $300,000, Phase 2, $2 million. SBIRAD, ADRD Focused FOAs, PA 19216, Advancing Research on ADRD. Budget limits Phase 1, $500,000, Phase 2, $2.5 million. PAR 18512, Lifespan, Healthspan Extending Interventions for ADRD Patients. Budget limits, Phase 1, $350,000, Phase 2, $2 million. STTR, ADRD Focused FOAs, PA 19317, Advancing Research on ADRD. Budget limits, Phase 1 $500,000, Phase 2, $2.5 million. PAR 18514, Lifespan, Healthspan Extending Interventions for ADRD Patients. Budget limits, Phase 1, $350,000, Phase 2, $2 million.
So, Stephanie mentioned kind of the overall funding at the NIH, and we participate in the Omnibus, as well as we have a specific opportunity with NINDS on advancing research on ADRD, which is essentially kind of like an omnibus for ADRD, meaning it can be investigator-initiated, whatever application you may have to address either general for the omnibus or Alzheimer's disease and related dementias for the ADRD focused FOA, we'd be very interested in seeing. And then we have a number of other funding opportunities that can be found on our website.
TABA, purpose, help small businesses make better technical decisions, solve technical problems, minimize technical risks, and develop and commercialize new products and processes. Examples: technology expertise, product sales expertise, IP protections expertise, market research and validation, development of regulatory plans, development of manufacturing plans, technical and business literature. If requested, business cannot participate in NIH technical assistance programs, Phase 1s. We strongly encourage the NIH Needs Assessment Program as the Phase 1 TABA.
So I want to mention some of the technical and business assistance that Stephanie introduced. Awardees can ask for funding in their application, especially for the Phase 2, where we really encourage them to do so because we know that our companies need help with IP or regulatory. They'll have to hire the consultants and things like that. So they can ask for that as part of their application. Next slide.
Text, already have a Phase 2. Consider the Commercialization Readiness Pilot, CRP, program or Phase 2B for post-Phase 2. CRP can be simultaneous or follow on to Phase 2 and Phase 2B, both SBIR and STTR. CRP SB1 mechanism enables an absence of subcontracting restriction. The subcontracting plan must still be justified in the application. NIA allows for both preclinical and/or clinical work through both the CRP and Phase 2B. NIA participates in all three CRP solicitations, PAR 20 to 128, PAR 2129, PAR 2130.
But I will say for the TABA in Phase 1, we actually just launched a great program for a needs assessment program to help companies identify their needs. So for the Phase 1, we really encourage companies to participate in that program. If you're already at a Phase 2 and need more technical and business assistance. One great opportunity is the Commercialization Readiness Pilot Program. If you just need to further your research, the Phase 2B is a great opportunity. And the links are provided here for the CRP.
Women-owned and disadvantaged small businesses. Goal: encourage participation in innovation and entrepreneurship by socially and economically disadvantaged small businesses and women-owned small businesses. Women-owned business must be at least of 51% owned and controlled by one or more women and primarily managed by one or more women, who must be U.S. citizens. Socially and economically disadvantaged business must be a minimum of 51% owned and controlled by one or more people who are socially and economically disadvantaged, who must be U.S. citizens. Businesses can self-certify during the application process. Certification information is encouraged by not required.
One major focus of ours is really diversifying the portfolio, and we feel that that is absolutely critical to getting the end results that we want to get in terms of the level of innovation.
Diversity Supplement Program. Administrative supplements to promote diversity in research and development small businesses, SBIR, STTR and SBIR Cooperative Agreements, PAR 18837. Goal: improve the diversity of the research workforce by recruiting and supporting students, postdoctorates, and eligible investigators from groups that have been shown to be underrepresented in health-related research or in the SBIR, STTR programs. Applications include identification of the candidate as well as a strong career development plan. Deadline: applications accepted on a rolling basis.
So we have several programs, one of which is the Diversity Supplement Program. So for those of you that already have a SBIR award at the NIH, we really encourage you to think about adding to your team and being able to conduct additional research by adding someone diverse to your team, applying for a diversity supplement where we will provide the funding to pay for that person and to pay for the additional research that they will do. So it's really a win-win in terms of you are able to diversify your project team and expand what you are funded for, all at the same time. And it's a rolling application, and and we review them on a monthly basis. So it can be a great way to expand what you're doing. So we hope to fund a lot more of these. So please, look into this, get in touch with your program officer, as well as our office, and we'd be happy to consider providing additional funds through this mechanism. And for those that have not had luck getting funded from the NIH before, we strongly encourage you to think about the NIH Applicant Assistance Program.
NIH Applicant Assistance Program. Free application preparation assistance for 10 weeks. Several participating ICs including NIA and NINDS offered for each receipt date. Next AAP due date is May 2021. Specifically encourage participation from small business owned or led by women and or other underrepresented individuals in biotech leadership. AAP application portal bit.ly/2020 AAP. Provided, Phase 1 preparation support and review, specific aims page review and advice, and submission process coaching. Not provided, grant writer, development of research plan, register small business for you, apply to NIH for you.
And we do encourage participation from underrepresented individuals in that program. It's essentially a 10-week coaching program to help companies understand how to fill out that application. And it's held ahead of every application receipt date.
Sample applications, a great resource. Links to 8 sample applications. Titles: 1. Portable slip testing device for measuring shoe floor coefficient of friction. Title 2. Broadly protective virus-like particle-based influenza vaccine. Title 3. Rapid, automated detection of viral and bacterial pathogens causing meningitis. Title 4. Rapid test for recent HIV infection. Title 5. Point-of-care HIV antigen, antibody diagnostic device. Test 6. Antibiotics for recalcitrant infection. Title 7. Novel indication for myeloid progenitor use, induction of tolerance. Title 8. Antigen detection assay for the diagnosis of melioidosis.
One great resource has been the sample applications, traditionally been through the NIAID. We actually are in the process of launching a few new sample applications from the NIA. And the first ones we're going to focus meet a gap that don't exist with the NIAID applications in terms of technology and digital health type applications. And we just launched our first web-based sample application as well. You could even see the summary statement as far as what the reviewer concerns were. And we have a couple more that we hope to add to our site in the next couple of months. So I think if you're looking to apply and want to see, how do you write a successful application, this is a tremendous resource for you to go to.
Research and Entrepreneurial Development Immersion Program, REDI. NIA is developing dedicated programs to spur innovation and train the next generation of scientist entrepreneurs. This initiative provides multiple funding programs such as Individual Career Development Award, Small Business Award, and National Research Service Award institutional funding programs to provide bio-entrepreneurship training to further enrich and diversify NIA training programs and allow trainees to acquire additional non-academic skills. Note: this concept was formerly referred to as the Entrepreneurship and Innovation Training Program, Enrich.
I mentioned, some of the entrepreneurial programs that are coming up. The National Advisory Council for the National Institute on Aging has approved a concept for research and entrepreneurial development immersion programs and potential funding opportunities that can help incorporate entrepreneurial training into the career development and small business programs at the NIA. We understand that in addition to supporting the development of research skills in our next generation of scientists, we also need to support entrepreneurial, science policy, science communication type skills that will enable them to be competitive for the broad types of careers that our trainees will often end up in. So more coming soon.
Entrepreneur Workshop Series. Goal: support startups along the journey to commercializing novel scientific products and technologies through a 2021 series of entrepreneurship workshops for SBIR and STTR awardees and applicants. Format: topical presentation by NIA's entrepreneur in residence followed by breakout discussions with subject matter experts. Hosts: NIA Office of Small Business Research and National Heart, Lung, and Blood Institute's Small Business Program.
And we just launched the Entrepreneurial Workshop Series. We had the first session a couple of weeks ago, and this is designed for our portfolio companies that have interest in any area around entrepreneurship. So each session, about once a month, will have a specific topic. The first one was around opportunity assessment, figuring out which is your market, how to address that market. The next one will be about corporate governance, including things about board formation, both the scientific advisory board, the board of directors, and really explain all of that to you. And we have entrepreneurs and residents and investors that will help walk you through each of these areas in each session. So definitely look for your email to join those great sessions.
Introducing our EIR, Don Rose, Ph.D. as an entrepreneur in residence for NIA. Don Rose provides valuable guidance and entrepreneurial coaching to NIA-funded companies. Don has extensive experience launching and building life science startups, most recently at the University of North Carolina at Chapel Hill, where he helped spin out 80 companies. Don is a special advisor at Hatteras Ventures. Prior to academia, Don held senior leadership roles at several life science startups. He also holds 6 U.S. patents and has published 8 papers and 2 book chapters.
And mentioning entrepreneurs in residence, at NIA, we have Don Rose, who can provide valuable guidance and coaching to NIA-funded companies. So if you are currently in our portfolio and you have questions about anything relating to business development, you can actually contact our office and schedule a 45-minute meeting with Don and just ask any business development questions. Don also spends part of his time as a special advisor at Hatteras Ventures. So he is very familiar with, he's been the CEO of startups, he's been an investor, and he can really help answer questions across the spectrum. And we plan on adding an additional EIR in the aging tech space in the coming weeks.
Tip 4. Obtain guidance from NIA-specific aims. 1 page, the executive summary and first impression. First 1/2 to 2/3, the elevator pitch, why is it meritorious? 1. The technology prototype to be developed. 2. The technical innovation the development would represent, the unmet need being addressed, and the technical challenges to overcome. 3. The value proposition and competition. 4. Textual highlights of preliminary data. 5. The relevance of the R&D to NIA's mission. Last 1/3 to 1/2. The specific aims for the proposed project. Key models, assays, and metrics. Quantitative performance milestones. Provide your draft-specific aims page for the project most likely to be competitive to NIA SBIR staff for feedback.
So if you have not applied before or have not been funded before and would like to, as I mentioned, we'd like you to get in touch with us. This is a great first page, draft of the specific aims page, which is a key score driving page of the NIH SBIR application. If you send that to us, we'd be happy to provide feedback. And connect with us if you have any questions.
Contacts, website, visit nia.nih.gov/SBIR. Follow us on Twitter at NIA_SBIR. Links to view upcoming events and funding opportunities. Link to join our mailing list. Questions? Email NIA smallbusiness@mail.nih.gov.
We anticipate getting the question about will the slides be available. If you email us at this link, we can send you the slide decks. Also, we will eventually have the presentation posted to our website once we are able to get it captioned and things like that. So look for that in the coming weeks. Thank you. Natalie, all yours.
Thank you so much, Todd. So hi, everybody. My name is Natalie Trzcinski, and I am a scientific project manager at the National Institute of Neurological Disorders and Stroke. And in particular, I hold all the small business grants related to stroke and neurodegeneration. So at the National Institute of Neurological Disorders and Stroke, our small business set aside is approximately $70 million a year. And at any time, we have between 150 and 200 active awards in our portfolio. At the end of the presentation, I'll include a link to all of our active awards. So as Dr. Korashevs will explain more tomorrow, NINDS is obviously not the only institute at NIH that funds neuroscience related research. Obviously, our colleagues at the NIA do as well and follow closely behind. We're the institute that covers all stroke related research, as well as other key diseases like epilepsy, spinal cord injury, traumatic brain injury, as well as hundreds and hundreds of rare and genetic neurodevelopmental and neurodegenerative disorders. I want to specifically note for this conference in terms of where NIA and NINDS stand in terms of Alzheimer's related research. This is a shared area of interest between our two institutes. NIA is the lead on Alzheimer's disease related research, particularly when it comes to AD clinical trials and clinical research. Whereas NINDS is the lead for vascular contributions to cognitive impairment and dementia, or VCID, Lewy body dementia, and frontotemporal dementia. And as you'll see from the companies that the NINDS supported companies that were selected to showcase today, we are the lead for the neurodegenerative diseases of ALS, Parkinson's disease, and Huntington's disease. As Stephanie kind of alluded to, there's overarching common principles across the SBIR program across all of NIH, but each institute is a little bit different. We're kind of like, states within the United States. And so it's important to kind of know how different institutes stand in sort of priorities, in terms of funding decisions, in terms of allowable budgets and whatnot. And I just want to make the point that NINDS is a very investigator-initiated institute. Our first priority is funding proposals with the greatest potential to advance our mission and reduce the burden of neurological disorders for everyone. We do have a priorities notice out that is included on this slide. And that will note that we, in particular, are, like I said, need to advance our mission. That's the first and foremost, most important thing to us. But we're also looking for companies who are dedicated to our mission space, in particular those who have chosen treating or diagnosing or being related to a neurological disorder as their first indication to market. We're also looking for companies with really novel technologies, as well as companies that have never been funded by the SBIR program before. We really feel that diversity of ideas makes us all stronger. I also just want to highlight too here our email address. Feel free to contact us if you're not sure if what you're looking at is in our mission space or not. If the disease that you're looking at is in our mission space or not, feel free to send us an email, send us your AIMS page, and we can let you know if it's in the NINDS mission space or not.
Color-coded chart of 10 phases and many programs.
Just to kind of give a sense of our structure at NINDS, we are divided into 3 different divisions, including the Division of Neuroscience, the Division of Translational Research, and the Division of Clinical Research. And throughout the divisions of clinical and translational research, we have many specific and dedicated programs to cover certain topic areas, as well as certain components along the translational and clinical spectrum. And so that's the purpose of this slide here, to show how many of these different programs exist that kind of hit all along the spectrum and hit certain portions of them. I also just want to note, though, that we support studies from proof of concept all the way up to phase 2B through regular SBIR opportunities, including the omnibus solicitation. So that being said, many of our specific translational, late-stage translational and clinical programs have specific opportunities that are only open to small business, and those are highlighted in yellow here. We like to call ourselves kind of, the small business program likes to call ourselves kind of the octopus of our institute, in that we have our tentacles in a lot of different programs throughout the institute. And so again, this is one of those instances where if you see a specific type of program that seems to fit in particular what you're doing, that, you know, feel free to contact us and find out, is there a small business specific opportunity that you can apply to.
Late-stage translational, clinical programs and projects attributes. 8 tabs above an arrow labeling them as phased grants, contracts, and cooperative agreements. The tabs are assay development, screening, hit to lead, lead optimization, preclinical development, early clinical development, clinical trials, and implementation. Program attributes include emphasize deliverables, milestone-driven, address risks and expect attrition, and provide funding and resources. Individual project attributes include end product-driven, stepwise, risky and risk mitigating, and need resources not traditionally found in academia.
So a lot of these programs that I've mentioned, these late-stage translational and clinical programs, are milestone-driven. They're meant to mitigate risk as you move throughout them. And attrition is expected with these programs. If you don't meet your milestones in any one year, funding can be cut off. So these aren't like your standard NIH R01 grants where, you know, you pretty much have 5 years of stable funding. That said, these come with you know, higher potential budgets, as well as in a lot of cases, a lot of programmatic and outside support with these projects. A lot of them are cooperative mechanisms. So that means that your project is you work very closely with NIH staff on your project. And like I said, in some cases you get access to outside consultants. In some cases you also get access to outside CROs who can also do big chunks of the work for you. You don't have to go out and find your own CROs in these cases.
NINDS SBIRSTTR Cooperative Agreement Funding Opportunities, U44. Devices, Translational Neural Devices, RFANS 18012. Contact Nick Lannels, nick.langhals@nih.gov. Biomarkers, Biomarkers PAR 21059 and PAR 21057. Contact Carol Taylor Birds, carol.taylor-burds@nih.gov. Small Molecules, Blueprint Neurotherapeutics, PAR 2111. Contact Chuck Cywin, charles.cywin@nih.gov. Biologics, Create Bio, PAR 18543 and PAR 17457. Contact Chris Bischoff, Chris BOSHOFF@nih.gov. Clinical Trial Networks, Neuronext, PAR 18628. Contact Kadran Lungu, LUNGUCI@ninds.nih.gov. StrokeNet, PAR 18563. Contact Scott Janis, JANISS@ninds.nih.gov. Many of these opportunities have non-standard SBIRSTTR due dates. Contact program staff.
As I mentioned, a lot of these cooperative agreements programs have parallel funding opportunities that are ones that are open to academics, all comers, and ones that are only open to small businesses. And you're going to want to look for those that have the U44 mechanism in the title of the funding opportunity. So in these cases, your application will get the same scientific merit review as those that are in the academic track, and you'll get all the same resources as those that are chosen for funding in that other track. But importantly, you're only competing against other small businesses for that funding opportunity. You're utilizing the small business set aside in those cases. So this is just a list of all these cooperative mechanisms and specifically the funding opportunity numbers with them. But more importantly is the contact information for the program directors who run these programs. And I really, really want to highlight in these cases how important it is to read the funding opportunity, come up with an aims page that you feel like fits the funding opportunity, and talk to one of these program directors is really key for these. These are very competitive, very highly stringent programs. And so it's really important to talk to a program director before you apply. Tomorrow, actually, I just want to highlight the Devices U44 program, which Nick Langhals will be speaking about tomorrow at NINDS, and then also the Small Molecules Therapeutics program that is actually run through the NIH Blueprint that Chuck Cywin will be speaking about tomorrow.
NINDS Phase 2B and Commercialization Readiness Pilot, CRP participation. Phase 2B, Specific Program Announcements, Preclinical, PAR 21114, Clinical Research, Clinical Trials, PAR 18665. Awards up to $1 million per year for up to 3 years. Strongly encourage matching funding. For Phase 2B applications proposing a clinical trial, applications must include at time of submission IND, IDE, or indication of non-significant risk. CRP, Preclinical Technical Assistance and Late-Stage Development, PAR 2129. Clinical Trials Technical Assistance and Late-Stage Development, PAR 2130. For CRP clinical trial applications, NINDS will prioritize funding those which have such information. Contact NIH program staff to discuss.
In terms of the Phase 2B and CRP funding that that NINDS participates in for our supported companies, I do want to point out that we do our Phase 2B a little bit differently in that we have our own funding opportunity for Phase 2Bs for NINDS related Phase 2Bs that are listed here. And in particular, if you're doing a clinical trial in a Phase 2B, you will need either IND, IDE, or indication of non-significant risk at the time of application for that funding opportunity. We also strongly encourage matching funding for our Phase 2B. The CRP, we participate in 2 of the 3 large CRP announcements. And again, in terms of the clinical trial, if you're doing a clinical trial in a commercialization readiness pilot program, we strongly encourage you to have had procured your IND or your IDE at time of submission, and we will prioritize funding clinical trials that have this information. So as has kind of been reiterated many times by Stephanie and Todd already, these are really instances where we really encourage you to talk to your program officer, talk to myself or our other program officers at NINDS about these programs if you're interested in submitting a Phase 2B or CRP. If you've received a Phase 2 from NIH and are interested in one of these opportunities, talk to us. We really encourage you to do so.
Support for NINDS-funded companies. Phase 1 companies, entrepreneurial training through I-Corps and C3I. Technical and business assistance, TABA, needs assessment. All companies, PA 18837 supplements to promote diversity. Access to innovator support consults, NIH Entrepreneurs in Residence, regulatory strategy. NIH-sponsored showcase opportunities. Speaking slots at partnership meetings, e.g., BIO, RESI, LSS pitch coaching. TABA support.
I also just want to point out that NINDS also participates in the I-Corps as well as the C3I programs that have been mentioned. We also participate in the needs assessment program. We really encourage those Phase 1 companies to take advantage of that. We are also a participating institute in the diversity supplement program. I'm actually the lead for that, so I really encourage you to reach out to me if you're interested in supporting a trainee. I'd be happy to talk to you about what makes a competitive diversity supplement application. And again, we participate in, we encourage our companies to take advantage of the seed innovator support, showcase opportunities like this, as well as TABA support.
Find and partner with NINDS companies. Use NIH Reporter, see our current active SBIRSTTR awards in Reporter. Contact us to learn more at NINDS_SBIR at ninds.nih.gov. A sample of the searchable Reporter webpage, indicating where to enter keyword, award year, and funding mechanism searches, and the places to select NINDS and check boxes for admin and funding.
And finally, I just want to point out that we're always looking for ways to facilitate partnerships for our companies and encourage any of those that are interested to reach out to us if you're looking for ways to synergize between you know what you're looking for and what our companies might be able to provide for you. We want all our portfolio companies to succeed and move forward to commercialization. And I just want to encourage the use of Reporter for those investors, partner companies that are there today. If you're interested in finding out what NIH supports, in particular, I don't see the link showing up right now, but we'll have that corrected. There's actually a link here to our active portfolio companies that I'm happy to share with anyone. So it'll just bring up a list of all our active grantees at any moment in time that you click on it. And really happy to walk anyone through Reporter. For example, if you want to look at, you know, hey, these U44 programs sound really great, really intense. I want to find the companies that went through that and I want to partner with them. We can show you how to do that. So feel free to reach out to us if you'd like to learn more. And with that, I will end and hand it back over to Stephanie.
Slide title, LINCS, Longevity Innovations and Neurodegeneration Company Showcase. Starting at 12:30 p.m., Digital Health Company Showcase. Starting at 1:30 p.m. breakout conversations with digital health companies.
Thank you, Natalie. And we do have some time for questions. Now, I'm not seeing a lot of open questions in the chat, but I encourage you to do that. We are looking at those, and this is a great opportunity to ask us some of your questions. While we're waiting for those questions, I know I have a question, which is, how does NINDS and NIA really think about success in the small business programs, particularly since many of the companies that we support are in those earlier stage? Again, you're often de-risking those technologies. So how do you guys think about that and think about that investor handoff?
The video platform features the speaker in full screen.
Natalie, go ahead.
No, you can go first, Todd.
Okay, sounds good. So really, there's no one, shape or size of what success is. It's going to vastly change depending on the type of technology, and understanding that, therapeutics is going to have a much longer runway to commercialization than potentially a research tool, or, another type of example, digital health, where there may not be the same regulatory thresholds. I think I mentioned earlier about, our real goal being to help support the collection of data that can help companies get to a key value inflection point. And I think when we see companies hit those value inflection points, then those can be defined successes. We have examples of commercial successes, like, as an example, Avid Radiopharmaceuticals, which, when Dan Skavansky, now the, I believe, CSO of Lilly, when he first spun out that company, and the first source of capital that he applied for was, in fact, SBIR. And now, the main types of PET imaging that's done in clinical trials for AD has been the Avid Radiopharmaceuticals technology, where real initial early development was done through SBIR. So, that's one example of something that got to commercialization more recently in that same diagnostic space. Really exciting is C2N Diagnostics just commercializing the first blood-based diagnostic for Alzheimer's disease. In the technology space, Biosensics, through a license to Great Call and then acquisition to Best Buy Health, has been commercializing some of the work that they did through SBIR funding around fall prevention and detection type sensors. But then also, success can be more intermediary and actually moving forward. So one example, and shows that, while the SBIR, so we have the phase 1, the phase 2, the CRP, the phase 2B, that can total about $8 or $9 million in a 6-7 year period. And again, this is project based. So we do have companies that might have multiple of those projects, but just in kind of one project moving through that pipeline can total a significant amount of money, but not nearly the amount of money that you may need to get to the clinic, through the clinic. So one great example, Cognition Therapeutics, which used our funding to actually get to the clinic, use the small business program funding, even do, I think, a phase 1 clinical trial. And through the NIA's clinical efforts and initiatives, was just funded by the NIA for about $70 to $75 million to do a robust phase 2 clinical trial for an Alzheimer's disease therapeutic. The type of trial we really need, to be done in that robust fashion. So it's an example that, the SBIR is really important to help our small companies, but it is not the only way that we fund small companies either. And so, each of these things is an element of success, and we're just happy to see that our companies are able to move forward from one step to another.
Yes, definitely. Agree with all of that. Just want to add the interest in really supporting rigorously done research. And one of the key kind of things that we think about also in terms of success is, having a clear go, no go answer at the end of each of these phases. That really, if you find out that things aren't working, it's been tested in a rigorous manner, that's okay. That's additional information for the scientific community. So NINDS is really interested in supporting really rigorously designed experiments. You know, it can be risky. We're about risk mitigation. It can be really novel, innovative, but you know, if you have really rigorous sets of experiments to test it out, that's the kind of thing that we want to see. I can just add a little bit of, you know, kind of NINDS success stories, you know, really supporting those academic investigators who, you know, might not kind of have the resources, the knowledge about, you know, about the commercialization process. For example, Lift Labs was, you know, founded by, you know, someone coming right out of their postdoc, pretty much working in their garage, developing this spoon that mitigates hand tremor. And it's now, you know, you can find it on Amazon. The company was bought by Google, and you can order this on Amazon right now. So those are kind of instances of, you know, innovators that we like to support and kind of build the resources around you to help move your product forward. You shouldn't fail because of you know, lack of knowledge about the commercialization process. That's what we're hoping to mitigate.
And the good news is we got a couple of questions here. There was a question, and this is kind of on the success vein, talking about if NIH, NINDS, or NIA have a connection to help small businesses obtain a government contract. And that's an interesting component of these small business programs. This is a phase program, so there's phase 1, phase 2, and many agencies use what they call the phase 3, where they're the actual purchasers of the technology. NIH is a little bit different in that we generally don't purchase the technologies. Again, we're here to help it get to the marketplace and transition to, or an inflection point with either an investor or a partner. So we generally aren't looking to purchase the technology through a phase 3 or through a full sole source contract, just because that's the nature of how we utilize our program. So we're a little bit different from some of the other agencies that may be out there and use the small business programs for other things. We did get a question about clinical trials. And I know clinical trials in the small business program for both NIA and NINDS are a little bit different. So briefly, can you guys touch on how you all utilize clinical trials? If somebody has a clinical trial, what should they do other than contact you?
Yeah, so at NIA, you know, I took a snapshot. Somewhere about 85% of our work is preclinical in nature in terms of what's funded by SBIR and STTR. Somewhere between 10 to 15% is clinical. We do allow, and you need to go and look at the specific funding opportunity, but at NIA, we don't have clinical trial. Well, there are NIH now clinical trial specific FOAs, but they're not separate programs. They're companion funding opportunities for the same program, but we separate them out into clinical FOAs so we can make sure that the application includes the necessary information for proper review. But generally, I mean, the different funding opportunities that we have, most of them do have a clinical trial companion FOA that incorporates clinical trials. Of course, you know, for this SBIR and STTR program, it's limited to the size of the budget. So, you know, our phase 2s are $2.5 million. Our phase 2B and CRPs are between $3 and $3.5 million. So, you know, through the SBIR program specifically, we're not going to be able to fund, you know, large phase 2s as an example, but early clinical work is definitely possible.
Yeah, and I can just clarify too that NINDS does not participate in the large omnibus clinical trial required solicitations. We actually have our own separate funding opportunities for clinical trials, and a vast majority of them, as I kind of alluded to in discussing the phase 2B, actually require IND or IDE or indication of non-significant risk from your IRB at time of submission. There are a few funding opportunities, mostly through the cooperative mechanism agreements, where it can span the preclinical to clinical stage. For example, in Chuck Sywin's Blueprint Neurotherapeutics Network, they can take you all the way from med-chem in small molecules to a phase 1 clinical trial. The idea through that is you know, you're working very closely with staff, you're working very closely with consultants throughout, and risk is kind of being mitigated in a very stepwise manner throughout that cooperative mechanism. Whereas if you wanted to receive a clinical trial through kind of the regular kind of standard R mechanism, that you would need IND or IDE at submission. But again, talk to us.
Talk to us, and I'd also state, I put the definition of an NIH clinical trial in the chat, because keep in mind that the definition of an NIH clinical trial is not the definition of an FDA clinical trial. And you may be doing, if you're doing human subjects research, you may be doing a clinical trial and not realize that that's actually falls within our definition. So just make sure, again, reach out and talk with us. And that's really, if you take nothing from the conversation today, that's the big thing that we would really encourage you to do. Now, very, very quickly, because we only have a couple of minutes left, I did get some questions around some specific topic areas, in particular for NINDS, if NINDS funds pain diagnostics, therapeutic products, things for migraines, and then whether or not either NINDS or NIA are interested in supporting COVID-19 research, and where that stands with both of your institutes.
Yeah, I can answer the migraine question. Yes, migraine is within the NINDS mission space, and we do fund diagnostics, therapeutics related to migraine research. Again, one of those cases where, you know, draft specific aims page, if you'd like to send it our way and talk about it, happy to do so. But yes, migraine is within our mission.
And in terms of COVID-related research, yes, we are interested. You know, it depends on the nature of the research, and you know, which is the right institute, and what aspects of COVID you're addressing. But if it's COVID-related, that is specifically related to aging, older adults, Alzheimer's disease, then yes, we will definitely consider those types of projects.
Yep, and NINDS is interested in examining neurological consequences of COVID, specifically in instances of where it's really clear that there is a big opportunity, time-sensitive opportunity, you know, not one of those cases where, you know, it's kind of a long scale, maybe preclinical process. We would support that through the omnibus solicitations, but we do have a specific supplement for time-sensitive neurological consequences of COVID if you have an existing NINDS grant.
So with that, I know we are out of time. There was one last question asking about the available intellectual property to license, and that's actually done through the tech transfer offices at each institute. So hopefully both Natalie and Todd can look and put some of those links in the chat. That is specifically associated with our intramural program. And so we do have tech transfer offices that are willing to help and guide you and talk with you about what's currently available.
And yeah, and this session tomorrow, if you have tech transfer questions, I think we're available. We'll have one of our intramural professionals, and then also tech transfer can help us answer. So definitely attend that. I do want to encourage everyone in terms of today. We have a break coming up, but the company showcase part, it starts. So there will be a presentation from several of our digital health companies. And then one of the nice things that we added to this event is what we call breakout sessions, where essentially if we were in person, as you can imagine, going up to the podium after a session and going and being able to ask some specific questions that you thought of when you heard their pitch. Well, you can now basically join a session with that company right after you hear their talk, starting at 1:30, where you can ask any questions that you have in your mind. So definitely encourage you to attend those breakouts as well. And then, encourage you to attend the other sessions for the rest of the day. We have the medical device showcase at 2, those breakouts, and then a panel on specific investors interested in funding aging technologies and some real new investment capital available in that space. And then we'll close out the day at 4:30 with a keynote by Joe Coughlin of the MIT Age Lab that I guarantee you will be exciting as well. So look forward to seeing you at the future sessions and in the partnering. And we thank you for your time.
Thank you, everyone.